It is one of the most transcendent moments in cinematic history, a sequence of pure, unadulterated awe, the gentle tremor in a leaf, the hushed notes of John Williams' score beginning their ascent. And then, the reveal, the camera pans up and up, following the impossible curve of a neck that seems to defy gravity itself, until it reveals the serene, majestic face of Brachiosaurus. In that moment, Alan Grant speaks for every person in the audience. It's a dinosaur, for the first time. A prehistoric animal was not a monster to be feared, but a creature of breathtaking beauty to be revered. It was a perfect synthesis of visual effects, sound design, and narrative, framing a piece of cinematic alchemy that transformed fossils into flesh and bone, and reignited a global fascination with the prehistoric world. This scene did more than just sell tickets. It cemented an image in our collective consciousness of the gentle, graceful sauropod. But how much of that breathtaking grace is cinematic poetry, and how much is biological fact? Now, let's roll the film, open the fossil record, and begin our investigation. Behind this celluloid miracle lies a profound biological enigma, a puzzle of flesh and physics that paleontologists have wrestled with for over a century. The central question is one of energy. What kind of metabolic engine did it take to power a 30-ton, 70-foot-long animal? For decades, the prevailing image of sauropods was shaped by our understanding of modern reptiles. They were seen as classic ectotherms, or cold-blooded animals, deriving their body heat from the external environment. This model painted a picture of sluggish, slow-moving giants, destined to spend their lives semi-submerged in swamps, using the water to support their colossal weight. An active, terrestrial life seemed simply impossible for such a creature under a reptilian metabolism. The energy budget just didn't add up. To be an endotherm, or warm-blooded animal, is to carry a biological furnace within you. It is a life of high energy consumption and constant activity, the life led by birds and mammals. But for an animal the size of a Brachiosaurus, a warm-blooded metabolism presents its own set of seemingly insurmountable problems. The primary challenge can be understood by looking straight up to the animal's head, held nearly 40 feet in the air. To pump blood that high against the crushing force of gravity would require a heart of almost unbelievable power and a circulatory system capable of withstanding pressures that would rupture the arteries of any living creature. When we examine the modern giraffe, the current record holder for terrestrial hypertension, we find an animal pushed to the limits of cardiovascular engineering. Its heart is a 2-foot-long, 25-pound muscle, and its blood pressure is more than double that of a healthy human. Yet, a giraffe's head is only 20 feet off the ground. A Brachiosaurus would have needed to pump blood twice as high. The sheer hydraulic challenge is staggering. Early estimates suggested its heart would need to be the size of a small car, weighing over 400 kilograms, just to manage the task. And this colossal pump would be working constantly, burning through unimaginable amounts of calories every single minute of the animal's life. This single problem, the biological mechanics of blood flow, became a cornerstone of the argument against an active, warm-blooded sauropod, the majestic creature we see on screen, gracefully raising its head to browse from the treetops, represents a physiological paradox. The cinematic image is one of serene power, but the physics suggest a creature on the constant verge of catastrophic circulatory failure. This dissonance forced us to ask a fundamental question. Was the iconic, high-necked posture we see in the film, and indeed in museum halls around the world, even possible? Or was the real animal a far different beast, with a lower-slung neck and a much slower, colder existence? The gentle giant of the silver screen was at war with the biological constraints of its own body. To find the truth, we have to look deeper, into the very architecture of its fossilized bones. To solve the puzzle of the Brachiosaurus's heart, we must look not at its chest, but into the very fabric of its skeleton. The answers are not found in sheer scale, but in microscopic details and vast, empty spaces. For decades, we could only study the external shape of these bones, but the advent of modern paleontological techniques allowed us to peer inside, revealing a biological story far more dynamic than we ever imagined. The first crucial piece of evidence comes from the field of paleohistology, the study of the microscopic structure of fossil tissues. By cutting impossibly thin, translucent slices from sauropod bones and examining them under polarized light, we can read the record of their growth, almost like reading the rings of a tree. In a typical modern reptile, a cold-blooded ectotherm, we see clear lines of arrested growth, or lags. These lines mark periods where the animal's growth slowed or stopped entirely, usually in response to seasonal changes in temperature or food availability. It's the sign of a metabolism beholden to the outside world. When we perform the same analysis on the bone of a Brachiosaurus, however, we see something radically different. The lags are often faint or absent entirely. Instead, the bone is a dense, chaotic matrix of fibrolamellar tissue, riddled with a massive network of haversian canals, the channels that house blood vessels. This is not the bone of a slow-growing reptile. This is the bone of an animal in a constant, rapid state of growth. Much like what we see in modern birds and mammals, the vascularized structure indicates a high metabolic rate, constantly pumping calcium and nutrients to fuel a relentless expansion of the skeleton. The histological evidence tells us that a young sauropod didn't grow in slow, seasonal spurts. It grew explosively. Putting on several tons per year, this rate of growth is biologically impossible for a cold-blooded animal. It requires the internal, 24-hour furnace of a warm-blooded metabolism. The bones themselves tell us that Brachiosaurus lived a life of high energy and rapid development. This discovery was revolutionary, but it was the second line of evidence that truly shattered the old paradigm. This clue was hiding in plain sight, in the form of large, hollow cavities, or pluricules, visible on the sides of the vertebrae for a long time. These were simply noted as weight-saving features, but a closer look, comparing them to the anatomy of modern birds, unlocked the secret to the entire sauropod machine. These were not just hollow bones, they were pneumatic bones, integrated into a sophisticated respiratory system unlike anything in the mammalian world. Brachiosaurus, like all sauropods, possessed an avian-style respiratory system, complete with air sacs. In mammals, our breathing is an inefficient, tidal process. Air flows in and then back out the same way. Birds, however, evolved a far superior system, a one-way flow of air. When a bird inhales, air flows into posterior air sacs, then through the lungs, and then into anterior air sacs before being exhaled. This means their lungs are constantly perfused with fresh, oxygen-rich air, allowing them to extract oxygen with incredible efficiency. These air sacs, extending from the respiratory tract, invade the skeleton, creating the strong, lightweight, and hollow bones that are hallmarks of avian anatomy. The discovery that Brachiosaurus had the same system was the key that solved multiple impossible problems at once. First, the problem of weight. A long neck held 40 feet in the air is a massive cantilever engineering challenge. By being heavily pneumatized, the neck vertebrae of a Brachiosaurus were composed more of air than of bone. The skeleton was an exercise in biological ultralight construction, allowing it to support its immense size without collapsing. Second, the problem of energy. The hyper-efficient avian respiratory system would have been able to extract the enormous quantities of oxygen required to fuel a warm-blooded, active lifestyle on a colossal scale. But perhaps most critically, this system solved the problem of heat. A 30-ton endotherm would generate a cataclysmic amount of internal heat, without a way to shed it. The animal would literally cook from the inside out. The vast network of air sacs, threaded throughout its body cavity and bones, would have acted as a massive internal cooling system. With every breath, air flowed through the animal's core, carrying away excess heat, a form of whole-body air conditioning. This elegant solution reveals how such a large animal could sustain a high metabolism without overheating. Finally, we must consider the concept of gigantothermy. This is the simple physical principle that the larger an object is, the lower its surface area to volume ratio, and therefore the slower it loses heat. A house mouse must burn energy constantly to stay warm, while an elephant retains its core temperature with much less relative effort. A Brachiosaurus was the ultimate gigantotherm. Its sheer bulk would have acted as a massive thermal buffer, helping it maintain a stable, high body temperature. However, it's crucial to understand that gigantothermy was not the engine of its warmth. It was the insulation, the high-octane, warm-blooded metabolism, evidenced by its bone structure and powered by its avian lungs, generated the heat. Its colossal size simply helped it keep that heat in, creating a stable, self-sustaining biological furnace of unparalleled scale. The evidence is clear, from the microscopic canals in its bones to the cavernous air sacs in its spine. Brachiosaurus was not a lumbering reptile, but a vibrant, energetic, warm-blooded marvel. With this new, evidence-based blueprint of a warm-blooded Brachiosaurus, let us return to that cinematic giant, standing in the dappled light of Isla Nublar. The awe we felt in that moment was real, and the artistry that produced it is undeniable. Spielberg's vision gave us a creature of impossible grace and scale, and in many ways, its portrayal was more accurate than any that had come before it. It was presented not as a tail-dragging swamp monster, but as an active, terrestrial animal, a depiction that was, at the time, still gaining ground in the public consciousness. The film captured the majesty, but it could never fully capture the machine. The animal on screen is a masterpiece of visual storytelling. The animal in the fossil record is a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering. The cinematic Brachiosaurus moves with a quiet, almost placid grace. The real animal, however, was a walking furnace. Its life was a constant, voracious quest for fuel, consuming hundreds of kilograms of foliage every single day to power its high-performance metabolic engine. On a cool Cretaceous morning, faint wisps of steam might have risen, not just from its nostrils, but from spiracles connected to its internal air sacs, venting excess heat from its core like a living power plant. The film shows us a neck that rises with serene effortlessness. Science reveals that this was possible only because that neck was an ultralight, cantilevered truss, more air than bone, supported by a system of ligaments and powered by an avian respiratory system of breathtaking efficiency. The deep, resonant calls imagined for the film are poetic, but the reality of its breathing was perhaps even more profound. A continuous, one-way torrent of air, processing the Mesozoic atmosphere to extract every possible ounce of oxygen. The movie monster is an illusion. The real animal was a biological reality far more complex and impressive than the illusion could ever hope to be. This is not a failure of filmmaking. It is a testament to the sheer depth of the fossil record. Jurassic Park gave us a window into the past, but paleontology gives us the blueprints to the world on the other side. The on-screen giant inspires wonder because it is big. The real Brachiosaurus inspires a deeper awe because we can now begin to understand how such a creature was biologically possible. It is one thing to imagine a living dinosaur. It is another entirely to uncover the evidence of its rapid growth, to map the air sacs that cooled its body, and to calculate the forces its heart had to overcome. The cinematic magic sparked our curiosity, but the scientific reality delivers a more enduring and profound sense of wonder. The gentle giant was not so gentle. It was a powerful, dynamic, and incredibly successful testament to life's ability to achieve the impossible. Cinema, at its best, gives us moments of sublime wonder that can ignite a lifelong passion for discovery. The majestic creature that Alan Grant saw was a gateway, an invitation to look closer, to ask questions, and to realize that the scientific truth behind the fiction is often the most spectacular story of all. The awe of the image on screen is fleeting, but the awe of understanding the reality behind it, that is a wonder that lasts forever.